Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast. And it is time. It's time to review every single live-action Godzilla movie. We're going to do it in chronological order, of course, over the course of probably 4 videos. I'll do the Showa Era Part 1, Showa Era Part 2, Heisei Era, and then the Millennium and Hollywood Era as well. So I did post an introduction to this Godzilla playlist a few days ago regarding these reviews, and so check that out when you get a chance. I do showcase some good resources like books and stuff like that, and my overall game plan for these reviews. Now the presentation style here, a little different than normal for me. I'm kind of doing the Daisuke Beppu style of presentation. If you have not checked out Daisuke's YouTube channel, definitely check it out. Very good stuff. But I'm going with his style here for these Godzilla reviews, at least the Showa era. Not only because I like to show off my little Criterion collection and my little wooden Japanese dolls I got while in Japan, but I think Toho is kind of copyright happy sometimes, so I'm kind of thinking if I include, pictures or screenshots into this video, there's a chance it could be blocked in certain countries. So I'm just going to go with the physical presentation style for visuals. So let's just start. Let's not waste any time here. Let's get right into the reviews. Now the first film is, of course, Gojira, also known as Godzilla, from 1954. The director was Ishiro Honda. He directed, I believe, 7 of these Godzilla films eventually. The composer is Akira Ifukube, who I believe officially composed at least a dozen Godzilla films. And then the special effects director is Eiji Tsuburaya, who was in charge of special effects for at least 6 of these films. So this is like your core crew here. Now, if you look at the ratings of the original film, it has a 7.6 on IMDb and a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. So this one is very well regarded, which is nice. So Japan is invaded by a massive dinosaur-like creature in this film by Ishiro Honda. Now, when the Japanese freighter Eikomaru is destroyed near Odo Island, another ship, the Bingomaru, is sent to investigate, only to meet the same fate with few survivors. A fishing boat from Odo is also destroyed, with 1 survivor, and fishing catches mysteriously drop to 0, blamed by an elder on the ancient sea creature known as Godzilla. So the reporters arrive on Odo Island to further investigate, and a villager tells one of the reporters that something in the sea is ruining the fishing. It goes from there. So this is where it all began, right here. We have Ishiro Honda, Akira Ifukube, and Eiji Tsuburaya together. It's important to remember those names because this is like your original crew who set this franchise up for the long-term success that it's had over the years, with the help of some decision-making by Toho Film, of course. So the film inspirations for Gojira were King Kong from 1933, which I believe was re-released in the 50s, and The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms from 1953. In fact, one of the working titles, I believe, for this film was The Big Monster from 20,000 Miles Underneath the Sea, but that was scrapped. Probably because it was too obvious what their inspiration was. And I guess I've read at times that Ray Harryhausen was apparently angry at Toho for earning commercial success by lifting their concept from his film. But if you look at the 2 films, they are quite different from one another. There are similarities, but they're quite different. Another fun fact is that, the word Gojira is a combination of 2 other Japanese words. It's gorira, which means gorilla, and Kujira, which means whale. So I found that kind of interesting as well. Now, in terms of actors, really Takashi Shimura is perhaps the most recognizable actor here in terms of his, career outside of monster movies as well. He was in a bunch of Akira Kurosawa films, and his scientist character here is the one who kind of explains in detail how Godzilla appeared. And as I mentioned before, this is one of the most highly acclaimed films in the entire franchise, and that's because it's more dramatic and it has more thematic depth than many of the other sequels and spin-offs. So there are some explicit references everyone knows by this point to World War II and the dangers of nuclear technology, even in the dialogue. There's a character at one point that references bomb shelters. There's another character that references her dead husband. So it gets, it does have a dark theme to it. Now, Honda, I read, actually traveled through Hiroshima's ruins on his way back home after the war. So I'm sure those images stayed in his mind for the rest of his life, and I'm sure it impacted how he handled these themes and how he directed the film. And, Gojira, it's a physical manifestation of the atomic bomb. But there are a few other real-world references that I think some people don't notice. There's the fire bombings in Tokyo near the end of World War II. There were 3 days, at least, I think, of fire bombings by the U.S. So seeing Tokyo on fire in this movie would have reminded Japanese people of that event, especially when it was released in the 50s, right? And then there's actually another real-life event that I didn't even know about until I was looking some of this stuff up. In 1954, there was a Japanese fishing vessel that kind of drifted off unknowingly into the waters of nuclear bomb testing that Americans were conducting, and one of the fishermen died fairly quickly from radiation poisoning, so that was kind of a big deal. And the opening scene of Gojira is a direct reference to that event. So there's a lot of real-world references in this movie. And overall, the script writing, it's quite good for a giant monster film. It really is. Even like the romantic subplot, it actually works pretty well. It basically involves the breaking of an arranged marriage, involving the scientist who develops the oxygen destroyer. And it's handled pretty maturely, and the characters understand there's more concerning issues involving death and destruction going on. How some movies, like the romance plot, is just kind of shoved in, and it just feels out of place. The one in this film actually does work pretty well, I think. So that's good. It's just a pretty good overall script, man. And speaking of destruction, there's actually a fairly healthy amount of it in this film. As I mentioned in my introduction video to this playlist, I am measuring the amount of screen and battle time for Godzilla in every movie as I rewatch them, using my own methods, which I explained in that video. But I clocked 22 minutes of screen and battle time for the big guy in this film. That's actually more than a handful of other films in this franchise, as we'll see. So the beginning of this movie kind of doesn't waste time. It kind of pumps you up with the theme tune during the opening credits. It gives you a shipwreck at sea. And then Godzilla appears even as early as like the 20-minute mark, right around there, for the first time. He looks pretty mean, especially he has like demented eyeballs in this one. They're kind of creepy. Monster design, it makes sense, because it's a pretty gloomy film, in terms of themes, and the aforementioned dark tones really kind of help with the way they designed it. Music accentuates this. Akira Ifukube is a legend in the industry, and it's easy to see why, because the musical themes in this film from the 50s have survived and are still recognizable even today, almost 70 years later. So that's pretty legit. And I think he was also responsible for developing Godzilla's signature roar. So when we get to the highlight on-land rampage action sequence, like the big one, it's pretty effective. You got the big guy stomping throughout Tokyo, causing a lot of destruction. The entire sequence, front to end, lasts about 15 minutes. So that's a pretty long, sustained, destruction sequence that works really well. And there are a few memorable attacks, I think one of which befalls a group of reporters in a broadcasting tower, so look out for that one. And overall, it's a good amount of the action takes place at night, which you'll see in the Japanese films, and I'm going to point this out and emphasize it. A lot of the action does take place at night, but it's lit well enough where you can clearly see everything. So that's kind of important when you're filming a monster attack sequence at night. It's not hampered by like rain effects or extreme close-ups or anything like that. In terms of pacing, it is a little bit on the dry side at times, I think. The finale is also rather low-key, taking place underwater. If you look online at Godzilla movie rankings, the original film is usually ranked quite high on people's lists, but sometimes you will see it in the middle of the pack, and I think the reason for that is the gloomy tone and kind of low-key pacing at times. If you want to watch a fun kaiju film, this one may not really fit the bill for that evening, you know what I mean? It's not something you might feel like watching all the time. And I will admit that I tend to rewatch this installment a little bit less than some of the sillier or action-packed sequels and spin-offs. The grainy cinematography is actually quite suited for a film of this type. I liked it. And the special effects, the black and white special effects, kind of sell the monster better than some of the colored sequels and spin-offs in the 60s, in my opinion. So yeah, I won't spoil the ending if you haven't seen it, but I will say that it does help to distinguish this film from some of the other Godzilla films with what happens, because technically, this Godzilla does not appear in any of the other Godzilla films. Now, I highly recommend Gojira. You have to watch it if you're going to explore this franchise. Now, of course, there was an American version, a bastardized version that was released called Godzilla King of the Monsters back in the 1950s. And even then, American producers knew that people hated subtitles. So they did not want to release the film in its original form because they figured it wouldn't make money. Maybe they were right. So they dubbed it into English, and then they proceeded to butcher the film by including new footage of Raymond Burr, who played a reporter named Steve Martin. An unfortunate name that is constantly distracting nowadays, given the popularity of the actual actor-comedian Steve Martin. So that, because remember, the original Gojira really wasn't available back in the day. So I remember the first time I saw the original version, or I should say the King of the Monsters, I should say that. When I saw that version, I remember laughing, because the guy's name is Steve Martin, and it was distracting. But apparently it worked, because the film made money and helped to make Godzilla more popular internationally. So maybe we should be thankful they did it. I don't know. But fact of the matter is this. If you've never seen the Japanese version, this film, Godzilla King of the Monsters, the American version, is moderately entertaining monster fare. But it lacks the depth and quality of the original Japanese version. However, if you've already seen Gojira, the original Japanese version that's widely available now, the American version, King of the Monsters, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like, it feels superfluous. It doesn't feel like it really serves a purpose anymore. I see really no reason to rewatch the American version of this film ever again, now that I've seen the original. It's also 16 minutes shorter. So they took the original film, butchered like 16 minutes out of it, and they butchered even more than that because they added footage of this Caucasian character who was just shoehorned into the film. So actually less than an hour of the original film is in the American version. That's not good. And the insertion of these scenes and like the forced interaction with the original Japanese characters, very clunky, noticeably awkward. All the Japanese body doubles. Because remember, they got Raymond Burr interacting with the characters, even though it was filmed after the fact, right? So they have like some stand-in for a Japanese character, but they can't show their face because it's a different actor. So they'll show like the back of their head, and Raymond Burr will be talking to it. It's just so awkward. It's so awkward. It's not good, man. It is not good. Some of the pivotal dramatic scenes of the original are excluded completely or dubbed over with different dialogue or narration. And in some cases, the narration doesn't work either. So this is, again, watch the Japanese version, definitely. And this Raymond Burr character doesn't even do anything. Like, it doesn't even impact the story, really, because they just shoehorned him in. You know what I mean? He just sits around with a pipe in his mouth. He's like, oh, this is kind of interesting while stuff goes down. So, yeah. Although, fun fact, James Hong from Big Trouble in Little China does do some of the English dubbing. So, yes, I strongly recommend the original Japanese version Gojira. The American version, you might want to watch it if you haven't seen it, just for, I guess, context purposes as to how things were adapted back in the day. But I really don't see that it has much of a purpose in 2021. So yes, that's the longest I'm going to talk about a Godzilla film, because there's a lot of background that I had to cover with that one. But yes, I strongly recommend this film. Definitely check it out, man. So let's move on. See if I could do this without knocking my girls over here. All right. All right, we got Godzilla Raids Again. This is the sequel. All right, shot in black and white. The director is Motoyoshi Oda, the composer is Masaru Sato, and the special effects director is Eiji Tsuburaya. So, if you haven't noticed, we have a little bit of a turnaround here, because we don't have Ifukube coming back to score the film, and we don't have Honda coming back to direct it, and there's a reason for that. So anyways, there's 2 pilots in this film. They're hunting, I think, schools of fish for a tuna cannery in Osaka. Plane malfunctions. It's forced to land near an island. Both pilots encounter Godzilla and a quadruped monster who falls off a cliff into the ocean. They report this to the authorities in Osaka and find out that the quadruped is an ankylosaurus called Anguirus, whose species had an ancient rivalry with the Godzilla species. So Dr. Yamane, who experienced Godzilla's attack in 1954, confirms that this Godzilla is a second member of the same species. So remember, it's not the same guy as the first film in terms of the big guy, Godzilla. It's a new mutation, I guess. Both monsters were likely reanimated by hydrogen bomb tests, so that's a similarity. So this movie came out 6 months after the original. 6 months. They churned this sucker out so fast, given the success of the original. They did not even wait for Ishiro Honda to finish his next directing obligation, or whatever Ifukube was doing. They're like, no, let's not even bring those guys back. We need to strike while the iron is hot. So they got Oda to quickly churn it out. Remember, different Godzilla from the first film, and plus the humans don't have the oxygen destroyer technology anymore, right? So, they have to deal with Godzilla in a different way in this one. They can't just use that special weapon. Now, there are some visuals in Godzilla Raids Again that mirror the first film. You got the atomic bomb references, firebombing references, but the emotional resonance in this film really isn't there. It's not there. And at one point, you'll notice this in the middle of the film, the characters, they're just kind of laughing and goofing off immediately after Osaka gets obliterated. So there's like a scene where Osaka gets obliterated, okay, by these monsters. And then, like, it cuts to the next day, and these characters don't really seem to care that much. Like, they kind of do, but they don't seem that upset about it. So the emotional consequences of destruction is not a priority in this film. And that's one of the big reasons why virtually everyone considers this to be a downgrade from the original. And that's, it's understandable, I would say. It's an understandable reaction. There is also a weird, out-of-place side plot involving escaped criminals. Lasts for like 5 minutes, I think. And that conflict inadvertently provokes Godzilla to attack the mainland of Japan due to an explosion that occurs. So it's almost like a real contrived situation there. So it's, it's a little dodgy script writing there as well. But I will say this. I do enjoy Godzilla Raids Again. I do like this movie. First of all, I think the action, it's pretty good. Remember, I'm measuring the amount of screen and battle time for Godzilla in every movie as I rewatch them, using my own methods, but I'm trying to be consistent. It's not a scientific study, but I'm trying to be consistent. And I clocked 16 minutes of screen and battle time for the big guy in this movie, which is actually less than the original film. But I think it still delivers. The monsters show up like 9 minutes into the film. Brief appearance. And they do throw down more thoroughly, like before the half-hour mark. And it's a pretty lengthy and satisfying monster battle. I mean, lots of fun, with the 2 big guys laying waste to Osaka, mostly around Osaka Castle itself, I think. And the fighting style is more like real animals, quick strikes and like holds and stuff. It's a good fight, and it does have a definitive end. And actually, Anguirus, if you really look at the fight, he actually did put up a fight. He did. He got some hits in, man. So I think it's a good solid monster battle, especially given that it's the first monster-on-monster battle in this franchise. The second half of this movie I actually quite like as well, because as everyone knows, I'm a fan of atmosphere, and this has some chilly atmosphere. It's set in Hokkaido, the second half of the film. It has a very icy finale against the military in the snowy mountains, and it's pretty memorable. More of an eventful finale than the first film, the original, I think. And it's very different from a lot of Godzilla films because of its use of ice. Tons and tons of ice in the second half of this film, especially near the end. I really like the visuals of Godzilla being surrounded by ice, you know what I mean, for such an extended period of time. It's a pretty good kaiju versus human finale. It does not involve futuristic technology. So I like that. The humans need to figure out a way using just contemporary weaponry at the time in the 1950s to defeat Godzilla. I think it's pretty neat. You know, it does get a little repetitive with the constant, snow avalanches and ice and everything like that, but I enjoyed it. Good amount of action takes place at night again, but it's lit well enough to see everything. So remember, I keep pointing that out in these Japanese versions. There's even a little bit of monster blood in this, which I like. Now, Godzilla's outfit seems to be a bit leaner than the original film, probably because they needed him to, wrestle with the other monster. And his teeth look weird. They, jut out kind of weirdly. I'm not sure I really liked Godzilla's teeth in this one. It's a little odd. But changes in costume design, it's a common thing for the franchise. Just need to get used to it. But overall, the monster designs in this film are pretty good. So yes, I actually do recommend Godzilla Raids again. I think it's pretty good. It is a downgrade from the original, but I think it's actually kind of underappreciated, to be honest. Now, of course, there was an American version of this, or an English language version, because, of course, you're not going to have people actually watching a Japanese film with subtitles. Why would we ever expect that? So, they came out with the butchered version, and butchered with a capital B, Gigantus the Fire Monster. So the commentary on my Classic Media DVD set is pretty hilarious. There's a commentator, Steve Rifle, completely just rips this movie apart, the American version. It's a rant roast that's very entertaining. Now, unlike Godzilla King of the Monsters, the last American version of the last Godzilla film, Gigantus the Fire Monster is just a bad movie. It's even worse. You know what I mean? The American version of Gojira had its problems. This one has a lot of problems. It's just piecemeal together. I mean, they inserted stock footage from a bunch of different, sources, documentaries or movies or something. They were just spliced into the film. They had nothing to do with Godzilla. And the way they use them in the story is really stupid. The music was changed and also taken from other movies. And the narration in this one, the English dub narration, is just non-stop, man. And I mean, it's constant during much of the opening half. It slows down a little bit during the middle monster battle, which I appreciated, but then it ramps up again later, and the final narration is terrible. Badly written. Bizarre story alterations, pointless regurgitations of what's happening on screen. The introduction's dumb, and it comes off as a lame documentary, kind of. But there are multiple scenes like that throughout the film. I mean, it's just a complete disaster. It's terrible. And they use the wrong roars for the monsters, if I remember correctly. Yeah, they do. So it's unwatchable garbage. One of the big reasons, actually, that I think Godzilla Raids Again has a bad reputation is the fact that many people still have not seen the original Japanese version of this film. I think a lot of people watched Gigantus the Fire Monster and just ended up concluding on that. So I think if I do not think that someone can have a valid opinion of this movie if they have not seen the original Japanese version. That's how different the versions are. So again, if you haven't, I definitely recommend checking it out. It's a pretty good flick. All right, the next one's a big one. I think this is going to be a longer video, isn't it? Yes, indeed it is. Well, whatever. All right. All right, we got Godzilla and King Kong, baby. King Kong versus Godzilla. Director Ishiro Honda returns after missing the last film. Composer Akira Ifukube returns after missing the last film. And Eiji Tsuburaya comes back to be the special effects director. So, Mr. Tako, head of Pacific Pharmaceuticals, is frustrated with the television shows his company is sponsoring and wants something to boost his ratings. A doctor tells him about a giant monster he discovered on a small island, and Tako believes that it would be a brilliant idea to use the monster to gain publicity. That's King Kong. He immediately sends 2 men to find and bring back this monster. Now, meanwhile, an American submarine gets caught in an iceberg The iceberg collapses and unleashes Godzilla, who's been trapped within it for a while. So yeah, in this case, I am going to talk about the original Japanese version of this film first, since the Criterion Collection recently released it in the United States. Kind of took a long time to get the original version out here. A lot of people probably still haven't seen it yet, but I feel like it's important to talk about the Japanese uncut version first. We'll talk about the American version after. Now, it's worthy to note that this is the first Godzilla film that's shot in color, so that's nice. The American characters really screwed up in this one. How do you run your submarine into the middle of an iceberg and accidentally release Godzilla? Like, that's a huge blunder, dude. Like, that's a blunder. It's pretty contrived when you think about it from a script writing standpoint, but yeah, the Americans screwed up in this one. The story, it's decent, I guess. Not especially interesting. It's sufficient enough to get you through. There's too much filler material involving reporters, explorers, and dancing tribal Japanese with black facial paint. You know, they do that in this. Script writing in general, it's worse than the prior Godzilla films. There's all kinds of contrivances and inconsistencies. You know, like I think they get instant news from the ship at sea. I don't even know if that's even, I don't know. It's just a lot of convenient lightning strikes occur and stuff like that. It's just not very good. I think more action would have helped to mask the fundamental filmmaking problems in this one, but is there enough action? Well, we'll see. The monster designs are not good. King Kong just looks horrible. Like a cheap knockoff suit from Walmart. It's a really bad suit. But laughably so. It's amusing to look at just because it's so scruffy looking. The Mighty Peking Man might look better than this, and that's saying something. Godzilla looks like kind of like the more popular idea of how he's supposed to look during the Showa Era film. So his suit's, it's not great, but it's a little bit closer to what we think of Godzilla to be in the Showa Era. And one reason why the suits change so much is because they get beat up while they're filming. So you use a suit during filming, it gets beat up, and then you put it in storage and it continues to deteriorate in storage. So, you know, that's why they change the suit so much. And in addition, the look of Godzilla has changed in consideration of the tone of the film. Of course, some suits are used in multiple films, but they do change quite a bit. Some of the special effects are not going to hold up nowadays, but the miniatures are neat to look at. I like miniature work in these older films. They're kind of neat. A real octopus was used at one point, but of course they bring in a fake one when they actually start fighting, when King Kong fights it. And Godzilla starts rampaging, fairly early on, but we're soon transported to the tribal island. And he doesn't show up again until like the middle of the film. His first fight with Kong, it's only a few minutes long. It's not really that great. It's okay. Fortunately, though, Godzilla starts fighting the military after that, so the action does continue to ramp up as the film progresses. The humans do a pretty good job of coming up with strategies to defend against Godzilla. You know what I mean? I won't spoil them for you, but there's some pretty cool strategies they use. And they have to deal with Kong as well, who attacks some cities at times. And Kong almost gets blown up with dynamite, really for no good reason, so he gets pretty pissed off. Understandably so. And then Godzilla and Kong start fighting each other again near the end of the film. And if you look at the fight, it's actually pretty satisfying. It is a satisfying battle. You get some basic rock throwing, which I'm not the biggest fan of. But some of their attacks are pretty amusing. I would not call this like a high-quality kaiju battle, because the way it's constructed is rather simplistic. But I feel like Godzilla was almost a little underpowered in this film. Almost like the filmmakers devolved him just a little so that he would be a more even match with Kong. It's just the impression I got while watching it. Even his atomic breath it's not quite as destructive as it probably was in the first film, for sure. But it's cheesy fun. For screen and battle time for Godzilla, I clocked 20 minutes for the big guy in this film. That's more than Godzilla Raids Again, but it still actually falls short of the original, believe it or not. So overall, King Kong vs. Godzilla, it's flawed, but it does have enough entertainment value to satisfy, in my opinion. If you don't like it, I understand, though. Now, the American version. We have a completely different opening in the American version of this, with English narration, of course. We get a lengthy introduction by a reporter, as well as some very distracting scenes that are intercut with exposition from Caucasian reporters for Americanization purposes. It's just every time they throw these reporters into these American versions, it just feels so awkward and misplaced. The story in the original Japanese version, it flows better without all these intrusive narrations and reporters all just thrown over everything. There's also an emphasis on special berry juice, I think, in the English language version. It's just weird, man. English dubbing is bad as well. Now, the American version does have a shorter runtime because they're trying to make it faster paced, and it should help the pacing with it being shorter. But the non-action stuff is simply better in the Japanese version. It just flows better. It's not great. The story isn't great in this, but it works better in the Japanese version, even though it's a little bit of a longer film. So I recommend that people watch the original cut over the American one, and there is no difference in ending. I know there was some really irresponsible reporter back in the day who said that like the ending is different in the Japanese version, probably just to get attention or something for whatever magazine or whatever they were writing for, but that's totally wrong. There's no change in the ending. So yeah, check it out. Obviously with the new Godzilla vs. Kong coming out, it'd probably be fun to rewatch this one, right? And then compare them. Now, if the new one is not better than this, I think it'd be a failure. Because I do kind of like this movie, but, I mean, come on. They should do a better job overall, I would think. But we'll see. So, alright, let's move to the next one here. It's a big one. Mothra versus Godzilla. 1964. Remember, so we had, just to put it in context, the original Godzilla was 1954. Godzilla Raised Again was 1955. Then there was a break. King Kong vs. Godzilla was 1962. And now Mothra vs. Godzilla is 1964. So, lost my place here. The director, Ishiro Honda, returns. Akira Ifukube returns as composer. And Eiji Tsuburaya returns as special effects director. So we got the crew's back again. Alright? This movie has a very good rating. I mean, it's got a 6.6 on IMDb, which is good, but the Rotten Tomatoes approval score is like 92%. So a lot of people like this one, and for good reason. You have a news reporter and a photographer. They take pictures of wreckage caused by a typhoon. They uncover a strange object in the debris, not knowing its significance. Later that day, a giant egg is discovered on the shore, and local villagers salvage it, and an entrepreneur of Happy Enterprises buys the egg from the local villagers. Instead of letting scientists study the egg, he wants to make it into like a large tourist attraction. And as it turns out, the strange object is extremely radioactive, and a pair of twin fairies show up to warn humanity about their plans here. Again, this is widely considered to be one of the better Godzilla films from the Showa era. Definitely an upgrade over both Godzilla Raids Again and King Kong vs. Godzilla in terms of the story and characters. The human conflict in particular, it's more engaging. It's more engaging in this. The humans have, the idea of building like a park, observatory, amusement type thing surrounding the unhatched egg and charging people to see it, which is pretty irresponsible. Because what if the egg hatches and the monster kills people? And plus the egg's radioactive, apparently. So there's an obvious lack of morality in the businessman's money-making scheme. But, at one point, the twin fairies who show up and try to warn humanity about what they're doing, they just end up leaving Japan because they've had enough of dealing with humanity's greedy motives. I found that pretty amusing. Also, the island natives and their relationship with Mothra are more interesting than King Kong and the natives from the last film. The Twin Fairies were played by the Peanuts, of course, who are a popular two-girl pop group. And Akira Ifukube does a good job with the music again. I mean, we get to hear the Mothra song for the first time. It's kind of a big deal here. Monster designs are definitely an improvement over the last film. Godzilla's now, I think, full traditional form at this point, really. terms of how most old school fans recognize him. And Mothra looks pretty cool. You know, some of the special effects for her attacks are good. And I think the special effects hold up surprisingly well in this film, actually. Now, in terms of Godzilla monster action, Mothra vs. Godzilla is better than all of its predecessors. So for screen and battle time for Godzilla, I clocked 35 minutes for the big guy in this film. And that is significantly more than any of the prior films. Remember, the highest we've had up to this point is only 22 minutes of time. So this is an upgrade in terms of action. And you can feel it. You know, around the half hour into the movie, Godzilla starts rampaging, and he actually emerges from the ground, which is pretty cool. And the way they portray him in this movie is kind of eccentric, nuanced. You know, even more so than prior films. I mean, like, he accidentally destroys stuff. You know, like he'll be walking by a tower, and his tail will get stuck in it, and the tower will crumble, and he'll almost hurt himself when he's walking around. And I think this was intentional by the filmmakers. Perhaps portray him even more as like a force of nature, instead of like, he's less anthropomorphic in this than just about any film in the Showa era, really. Less human in this one, you know? Now, if you're watching this movie for the first time, and you become a little bit frustrated by the lack of action when you're watching it, just be a little patient. Just be patient, because the final half hour of this movie is just loaded with action scenes. And Godzilla returns, you know, near the 50-minute mark, and the big finale basically runs from that to the end of the film. Military gets involved. There's some new tactics again against Godzilla. They're pretty effective. You know, I like how in each of these movies the humans try to think of something else to kind of attack him with. I mean, a lot of times you get the tanks, you know, the airplanes, but they'll always mix in something new, you know, to see if it works. And sometimes it does work pretty good. I like some of the attack strategies from Mothra. She uses her flapping wings to create some strong wind. And she actually grabs his tail and drags him around at one point. So she puts up a good fight. And actually kicks his butt for a good portion of the fight. However, again, I don't know if it's a problem for me, but it just feels like Godzilla gets beaten up a little too much in this film. You know what I mean? It's almost like, I don't know if I wouldn't say it's to the point where he's a wimp or a total pushover, but it starts to kind of feel that way at times. You know, because even when he destroys buildings, it's almost like by mistake. But, you know, he does get some good shots in against Mothra, but he's not intimidating in this film, I don't think. That may be my biggest criticism of it. You know what I mean? But, again, sometimes you'll see the power level of Godzilla and his badassery is definitely, it varies in all these films, even the Japanese ones. So it's not a big deal, but I just noticed it. Now, the first time I watched this movie back in the day, I remember being surprised at how it ended. Just like the last 15 to 20 minutes, I'm like, ooh, okay. So I won't spoil it for you if you haven't seen it, but I was like, all right, that's pretty neat. You know, the fighting dynamic changes in a few interesting ways. So Mothra vs. Godzilla is a high priority for those of you who want to explore this franchise. It's an impressive film. You know, if you rank it in terms of giant monster films, kaiju films, this is legit. Now, of course, we had to have an American version. Why not, right? Godzilla vs. the Thing. Thankfully, there's not a lot to say about the American version. The biggest thing to point out is that there's one short additional action scene that they put in the American version. And it's a missile attack against Godzilla. It's actually pretty good. And it was never included in the original Japanese version. I think Toho shot it specifically for American audiences. So it's pretty surprising. It's not that often where you see, you know, an American version of a Godzilla film that has an advantage over the original. So, yeah, that's pretty interesting. Keep in mind that the runtime of the US version is still a little bit shorter, so they cut some stuff out. I don't think anything too significant. But this is probably the best US alteration of a Showa Era Godzilla film, to be honest. So, you know, if you end up watching the American version instead of the Japanese version, I don't think it's that big of a deal in this case. All right, we got the next one. The next one's also a fan favorite. All right, we're halfway through this video. Yeah, all right. Yes. Yes. We got Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, baby. Now this one is Shiro Honda returns. Akira Ifukube returns, and Eiji Tsuburaya returns. I mean, this is the crew, people. This is the crew. Police Detective Shindo is assigned to guard Princess Selina Salno of Selgina. Okay. During the princess's visit to Japan, due to a suspected assassination plot. However, her plane is destroyed en route. At the same time, a meteorite shower draws attention of Professor Murai, who along with a team of scientists strikes out into the wilderness to examine the largest of the meteors, which has magnetic properties. And to Shindo's surprise, Selina turns up in Japan without her royal garb, but claiming to be from the planet Venus and preaching to skeptical crowds of forthcoming disaster. And to their surprise, she's actually correct in some of her predictions. Godzilla is going to destroy a ship at sea, and Rodan will emerge from Mount Aso. So, yeah, there's some weird stuff going on here. And, perhaps Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, will also appear somewhere. I mean, you can probably tell that's going to happen. So the opening plane scene, it's actually pretty interesting and fun. Unfortunately, the human storyline of this princess, whose inner Venus alien ancestry or whatever briefly awakens, it's basically lame filler material. It occupies much of the first hour. She has very little character development, despite having a pretty good amount of screen time. You don't really know if the alien is good or bad early on, which I guess is a good thing. But there are some human bad guys. They're not that fun to watch. There's a comedy show to sit through. There's another singing in a Mothra song, I think twice in this film. And there's some dull discussion between reporters. So I do not watch Godzilla movies for stuff like this, especially when it's kind of dull. It's not, terrible, but it's just, I'm not a big fan of the story in this film. And by the way, they didn't even feel like keeping two Mothra from the last movie, Mothra vs. Godzilla. So basically what they do is they pull an Alien 3, and they basically kill one of the monsters off screen. So that second monster, you'll know which one just magically disappears between films or dies between films. You should just call that little baby Newt. Just call him Newt from Alien 3. Because that's basically what they do to it, which is kind of disappointing. Eventually, Mothra attempts to persuade Rodan and Gojira to unite against Ghidorah before he destroys the Earth. So this is the first time Godzilla kind of plays a good guy in the franchise. So again, you see they're mixing it up, trying to make him more family-friendly, and the kids will like him more, maybe. Now, in terms of Godzilla monster action, Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, it's a bit on the light side. For screen and battle time for Godzilla, I clocked about 20 minutes for the big guy in this movie. That's a downgrade from Mothra vs. Godzilla, which did have a lot of action, but still, it's a downgrade. And there is a reason for this, unfortunately, which we'll get to. Now, Rodan shows up near the 30-minute mark, only for a minute, and it doesn't attack anything. Barely counts as an appearance. Godzilla shows up, 10 minutes later, blows up a boat. The scene lasts less than a minute, because we need to cut back to see what all these human characters are doing. Godzilla and Rodan show up, 8 minutes after that. The scene lasts a few minutes. They don't even fight each other. Are you seeing a pattern here? And then they finally fight at the 50-minute mark, but only for a minute. So, thankfully, King Ghidorah shows up and just starts wrecking shop. And his acts of destruction are portrayed quite well. Really cool. Definitely an entertaining set of action scenes with him. Now, when the finale begins, there are still cutaways to the human beings who are in a completely different location fighting each other. And it does hurt the flow of the fight. So from what I've said so far about the action, this movie is lacking in sustained action set pieces. Really lacking. I do like the scenes with Ghidorah just wrecking stuff. And at least the human gunfights do kind of help the pacing a little bit. This movie reminded me of the 2014 Hollywood Godzilla film, with all the freaking cutaways to show these mediocre human characters doing stuff instead of the monsters. And I noticed this even more in my recent viewing when I had my stopwatch and I was clocking the monster battle time. However, with that said, and that is frustrating, it is frustrating. With that said, the saving grace of Ghidorah the three-headed monster is that there's more cheese in this film than the state of frickin' Wisconsin. I mean, the special effects range from actually good to bad, but the monster mannerisms and battle strategies are just ridiculous in this film. These guys look like they're trying out for like Saturday Night Fever instead of actually fighting each other. And it's just glorious. It's glorious. Now, if you have a sense of humor like me, you will be rolling on the floor in gut-wrenching laughter, watching all of these monsters get together and kind of dance their way to victory. This is the funniest fight of the entire franchise, of every Godzilla film. You know, the first time I saw this as an adult, I actually collapsed onto the floor and had trouble breathing. I was laughing so hard. So it's funny. You know, monster design's kind of a mixed bag. King Ghidorah is really cool. I like his electrical attacks. You know, his three heads are moving a lot of movement. It must have been a pain in the butt to film. And, you know, definitely one of the coolest and most recognizable monsters in the franchise. On the other hand, Godzilla himself kind of strolls around. He's got weird eyeballs in this film. And he has... These have to be the most ineffective atomic breath attacks in the entire franchise. Like, he'll hit someone, and it's basically just, like, zero damage. It's like he's blowing bad breath in these monsters' faces. Rodan looks like a mutant chicken. That's what I thought of when I saw Rodan. It's like, is this a mutant chicken version of Rodan? And Mothra stays in larva form the entire time, too. So you just can't make this stuff up, people. They act way more like humans in this movie, which is amusing. But I love the tag team attacks in the finale. It's fun. Totally saves the movie, this finale. Because if this movie ended kind of like it was going in the middle section, I don't know if it would have earned a pass grade for me. But the last half hour of this movie is just like, it's a gift from the heavens. So I do like Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. I don't like this film as much as a lot of fans out there who really like it, some of them. But I do enjoy it, mostly for the final half hour. It's worth watching for that. Now, there is a US version of this. It's 8 minutes shorter. I don't think any of the cutscenes were, like, all that important, probably because I didn't like the story much. A gunfight is shortened, which is kind of odd. But the bigger problem is that Ifukube's score is replaced in sections of the American version, and you can't do that. But I think this is one of, like, the last major US alterations of the Japanese Godzilla films, with Godzilla in 1985 being an exception. But like I say, for most of these films, just stick to the Japanese versions. You know what I mean? If you want a proper experience. Although if you have kids that want to get into it and you don't want them reading subtitles, it'd probably be easier for them to get into the English language versions, right? So I mean, they do have their place, but I basically prefer the Japanese versions to all of these films, personally. All right, let's keep rolling. The invasion of Astro-Monster. Yes. Ishiro Honda returns. Akira Ifukube returns, and Eiji Tsuburaya returns. Two astronauts, Fuji and Glenn, are sent to investigate the surface of the mysterious planet X. There they encounter advanced and seemingly benevolent human-like beings called the Zillions, and their leader, the Controller. So, the surface is attacked by a creature that the Zillions call Monster Zero, but the astronauts know it's King Ghidorah. And then the monster leaves, and these alien dudes basically say that King Ghidorah is attacking them constantly. You know what I mean? And they live underground in constant fear. So they request. And they're like, hey, can we borrow Godzilla and Rodan from Earth to fight off King Ghidorah? You know, if you let us borrow them, we'll give you the cure to some incurable diseases on your planet. So the astronauts return to Earth and deliver the message to humanity. I like the space exploration stuff early on in this, and we eventually get to see some monsters fight on another planet, And a few of the Gamera films did this, if I remember correctly. I'd like to see more of this in the future if the producers have the balls to do it. But it just feels different, especially when the planet has no atmosphere. It's just cool watching monsters fight on almost like a moon-type surface with just the stars and stuff. It's pretty cool. I like it. Some of the special effects are actually pretty good. You could tell they're miniatures at times, but it's cool. It's all neat to watch, I think. I just like this stuff. I like the design of the flying saucers in this. They're like bright white with like blue trim. They look pretty sweet. Pretty slick. On the other hand, these aliens have like these terrible rubbery like uniforms with like black eye shades and antenna caps. It just looks stupid, man. I mean, I'm not a fan of their costumes. Of course, it does give, it gives that old school science fiction schlock vibe, I guess. So, I don't know. But in terms of Godzilla monster action, Invasion of Astro-Monster, it's got some problems. For screen and battle time for Godzilla, I clocked 13 minutes for the big guy in this movie. That is by far the lowest amount for the franchise so far, per my calculations. The filmmakers do spend a bit too much time on the human-alien conflict. It's a decent plot overall. I do think it's a decent story. I do like the lead actors. This movie needed a lot more action to make it into an upper echelon kaiju film. It really did. King Ghidorah shows up 19 minutes in, attacks the rock formations on Planet X, damages the alien bases, and then Godzilla and Rodan show up for a little cameo. They're like transported in little bubbles in space, which is kind of fun. And then the monsters actually fight in the middle of the film. Godzilla and Rodan, right, show up to fight King Ghidorah, but it's a very short battle. Like, that should be a highlight sequence, and it is entertaining. It's just too freaking short, man. Really should have been longer. The memorable moments are a vicious tackle that Godzilla inflicts, and there's a fantastic celebration dance that you might see. And Planet X, again, is a fun setting for a fight. So if you're going to skimp on monster action in a Godzilla film, you got to give me something else. You know what I mean? We got to see maybe a few more fights between the aliens and the humans. Have a little flying saucer versus plane battle, right? We don't really get that in this film. It just seems so obvious. Like, if you're strapped for budget or something, you don't want to have the monsters fight a lot. Give me some, just throw the saucer out there, throw a plane miniature out there, just have some fights that way. To give me something to hold my interest. But they don't do that. Or give me a really good story, which it really isn't as well. So, it's just, it's not good. Now, it's nice that King Ghidorah and Rodan are around to carry some of the slack when Godzilla isn't around, because they do some stuff, right? But the quantity of the monster action in this film is just underwhelming. It's underwhelming. Even if you count the stuff that doesn't include Godzilla, and there's not a whole lot of it. Near the end, the monsters attack Japan, and that is the best sequence of the entire film. Again, it's a film that it's just okay for a lot of the runtime, and then it finishes strong. You know what I mean? It finishes strong. It's a long, good scene with a bunch of destruction. There are a few fun combo maneuvers between the monsters. So, it's almost like a round of golf. Some of these Godzilla movies. If you ever play golf, and if you ever have a round where you're playing like crap, but the last few holes you play good, you know what I mean? It's almost like you feel better leaving the course for the day, right? Even though you played bad, the last few holes are pretty good, and you come away feeling all right. You feel a little jazzed up. That's kind of what this movie is. It finishes strong. That's all I can say. It's not as glorious as the finale of Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. Let's get that straight. It's not that amazing, but it is satisfying. So after I'm done watching the film, Invasion of Astro-Monster is an example of how even a weaker Godzilla film, it has a certain level of entertainment value to it. I would cautiously recommend this. Some people, again, like it a lot more than I do. But I do get some amusement out of it. And when I watch it, at the end of the day, I'm glad I rewatch it. So, yes. Yes. You have Ibra, horror from the deep, also known as Godzilla, versus the sea monster. Now this one, well, we'll see what my opinion is on this one. Now, the director here, Jun Fukuda. Composer, Masaru Sato. Special effects director, Sadamasa Arikawa. Alright, pay attention. After Yada is lost at sea, his brother Ryota steals a yacht and with his two friends, and then a bank robber shows up. And then they come across the sea monster, Ibra. That's a giant lobster. We have a giant lobster in this movie. And then they wash ashore on an island. There's like a terrorist organization there. It manufactures stuff. And then illegally using like the tribal people there that are slaves. But the slaves are trying to revive Mothra to help them out. And there's like conflict between our protagonists and the terrorist group humans. And there's like these different monsters that show up, and Godzilla just happens to be sleeping in a nearby cavern, so he's going to show up too. How convenient. Alright, so one thing to observe is that we have a wholesale changeover for director, composer, and special effects director. I think Tsuburaya had a hand in this maybe, off-grid. But, so just pay attention to that. And this movie was originally supposed to be a King Kong movie, but that fell through. And so they threw Godzilla in there. Now we begin with some cheery music during the opening credits. We get a hilarious dance endurance contest between the humans, which is like on day 3, where the grand prize is a luxury yacht. So they have a dance contest where your grand prize is a luxury yacht. Like, you can't make this stuff up. Our male leads break onto the yacht, and then the robber shows up, and then they sail off. And then, of course, things happen as I said. Very bizarre way to set up a film. Alright, but this movie gets a lot of brownie points from me, because it's so distinguishable from a lot of the other Godzilla films. It's a very memorable film. It is. Even if you don't like it, you'll remember this. So first of all, I love it when kaiju films use new monsters. This one has a giant lobster. A giant lobster. Of course, I'm a huge fan of Space Amoeba, that movie. You remember that? The movie had a squid that walked on land. I mean, that's just freaking stupid, but I love it. And there's really something special about watching giant monsters that are just kind of ridiculous. This movie has that. Even better, this lobster craves human shish kebabs and kills some people in fun ways. And then we get some of that tasty lobster action within the opening 25 minutes, so you don't even have to wait that long for this thing to show up. And this movie also has the following. You get fighter planes, lots of cheesiness, Mothra, and a random attack from a gigantic condor that looks like a mutant chicken. I don't know about this mutant chicken thing I keep seeing in these movies, but the condor looks like a mutant chicken to me. This is good stuff. And I make fun of the condor, but the monster fights are amusing, man. And the special effects are fun. The storm effects are pretty good. Godzilla's fight with Ibra is fun. Some of it takes place underwater. There are a few random giant monsters who show up. And then we get a fun jet plane attack, followed by an evil human base battle. And then Godzilla fights Ibra again. So if it sounds like a healthy dose of action, that's because it is. In terms of Godzilla monster action, Godzilla versus the sea monster is legit. So for the scene and battle time in this film, I clocked 23 minutes for the big guy. That's better than most of the films we covered so far. And after this movie was over, I'm satisfied with the quantity of Godzilla action. It's also quite different from other entries in this franchise because all of the action takes place on like an isolated island. It's a fun tropical environment. So a lot of times I'll watch this movie in the late afternoon and then go out for a seafood dinner after. You know what I mean? It just gets you in the mood, you know. You just want to take a chunk out of that lobster and grill it or something. The human conflicts are stupid, but they're pretty engaging and amusing. I will go to bat for this. I would rather have a stupid plot involving humans that's amusing than a serious one that's boring. I actually think stupid plots in some of these Showa Era films can be superior to the more serious ones, in my opinion. The humans are in constant danger in this film. They sneak around the enemy base. constant danger. It's a colorful film as well. Even the alien base is quite colorful. There's no dramatic depth in this film whatsoever. But the conflict, it moves at a nice pace, even when the monsters are off screen. There are no board meetings with like military leaders or scientists trying to figure out how to stop Godzilla. You don't get any of that here. And it's pretty refreshing not to see any of that, to be honest with you. We do get a different Mothra song this time. And speaking of Mothra, she's pretty freaking lazy in this film. Mostly just sitting around on her butt doing absolutely nothing. You have these villagers begging her to help them, and she just sits there. Like, you mind getting off your butt and helping us out there? I mean, what's going on here, lady? Now, Godzilla takes a nap at one point, and he looks quite cute and calm and very peaceful while he's sleeping. I kind of like that scene. And, yeah, so it's good. It's good. You know, he gets resurrected like Jason Voorhees got resurrected in a Friday the 13th film. And after that, basically nonstop action for the rest of the film. So, Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster could be one of the funnier films of the franchise for me. Maybe not quite as funny as the Three-Headed Monster, but it's funny. For tropical fun, you can't go wrong with this. Now, I seem to enjoy this more than most people. A lot of people don't like this movie, but keep that in mind when you go into it. Don't be expecting like a great kaiju film. There's something about this one that I like. I think it's its uniqueness. All right, is this the last film of the evening? I think it might be. Yes, I believe it is. All right. There he is. There he is. It's Son of Godzilla. 1967. Now, again, these movies came out fairly regularly. They were on the 8th film in 13 years. So they're churning these out. Now, the director, Jun Fukuda. Composer, Masaru Sato. Special effects director, Sadamasa Arikawa. A team of scientists are trying to perfect a weather controlling system. Their efforts are hampered by the arrival of a nosy reporter. There's a sudden presence of giant praying mantises, of course. And an unexplained signal coming from the island center is all screwing up their scientific investigations. Now, investigating the mantises, which are named Kamacuras, the scientists find the monstrous insects digging an egg from a pile of earth. And the egg hatches, and a baby Godzilla emerges. And shortly afterward, Godzilla arrives, and things go from there. This is the same director, composer, and special effects director from Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. And it's the second straight film where it takes place on a tropical island. So they're in tropical island mode. Now, the monster designs range from impressive to incompetent. The best thing being the mantises, the Kamacuras, and you get a giant spider, Kumonga, which I appreciate for being different from what we've seen so far in this franchise. If you bring in a new monster that's kind of cool, you're getting brownie points from me. You're getting brownie points. The worst thing is Godzilla and his son in terms of the monster designs. I kid you not. Godzilla looks like a reptilian version of Homer Simpson to me in this film. The way his face looks, he looks like Homer Simpson. And it has to be one of the worst Godzilla designs, at least for a face, in so far in the franchise. It just doesn't look good. Baby Godzilla, known as Manila or whatever, definitely the worst monster design of the entire franchise. And it makes noises that are just freaking obnoxious. It's like a donkey noise or something. Babies should be cute, not ugly and annoying. And here's the shocking thing. The filmmaker's intention was to make a cute baby Godzilla. That was their intention, from what I've read. It's not like they were like, oh, let's just make an ugly baby for like social commentary or something. No. They were trying to make, for the dating crowd. That was what I read. They tried to make a cute Godzilla baby for the dating crowd. Well, guess what, fellas? You freaking failed. Miserably. An abject failure of monster design. Every time this thing is on screen, Baby Godzilla, the movie's just painful to watch, man. I cannot believe that they failed this badly at a monster design. It's terrible. It doesn't even look like Godzilla either. And they did a much better job with the baby version of Godzilla in the Millennium Era films, which we'll get to later, but yeah. The scoring, it's pretty bad at times, especially at the start. Way too kiddie. Sounds like something you'd hear from a Barney and Friends episode. Listen, I got no problem with directing movies towards kids, but, I mean, good kids' movies are enjoyable on the adult level as well, right? If they're good. There are times where the music gets better, but it's underwhelming. On the positive side, I do think that the pacing is pretty good. You know, the filmmakers only spend a little bit of time on the subplot of the scientists and their weather machines. And maybe just the opening 20 minutes, they're really kind of spent on that. Middle section includes some interaction between Godzilla and Manila. I guess it's alright. It's okay, I guess. There's a bullying theme to this film. Could resonate with some people, so there is that to it. The monster fights are kind of one-sided, but they are kind of fun to watch. You know, there's no sign of Mothra or King Ghidorah anywhere, which, in my opinion, is kind of a nice change of pace again. You know, in this series, you don't want the same monsters showing up every single film. Godzilla shows up for a brief moment at the beginning, barely counts as an appearance. Then you get some giant mantis action. Baby Godzilla shows up by the 30-minute mark, so things are moving okay here, right? I do like how the mantises bully Manila. They kick him around, abuse him a little bit. Probably because I don't like the friggin' monster design of that thing. I can't relate to it. But Godzilla does fight these bully characters quite in amusing ways. I like the interaction. And there's a brief fight between the humans and the mantis as well. It's pretty good. The staging of the fights is kind of hit or miss. The Godzilla versus Mantis fight, again, is good. Much of the other stuff is kind of basic. Like the spider, it doesn't really have that many attacks. You're like, well, how many attacks can a spider have? But I don't know. I feel like they could have mixed it up a little bit. You know, the web slinging does get a little bit repetitive. And it does shoot a few stingers at times, which is pretty cool. But it's not exactly satisfying for a finale fight in a Godzilla film. You know what I mean? It's pretty good, but it's not like an elite fight scene at all. On the other hand, just seeing a giant spider in a Godzilla movie is inherently interesting to watch to a degree. Now, in terms of Godzilla monster action, Son of Godzilla has an acceptable level of screen time. I gotta make that clear. For screen and battle time combined, I clocked 20 minutes for the big guy in this movie. Not bad in terms of screen time. The problem is that Godzilla's runtime is primarily spent just hanging around with his son, not the fighting. So I think that context degrades the overall quality of his screen time. I mean, yeah, I know, some people like the interaction between him and his son, but I thought it was just alright. You know, I'm flexible with giant monster movies, but the interaction here, it's not as fun as most of the other films. It's just the way I see it. So, you know, this movie, it's really not that good. If I watched it in a good mood, maybe I'd give it a pass grade, if I watch it in a good mood. But compared to a lot of the other films we covered so far, even some of the weaker ones, this is the one that I like the least. You know, it's just the one that I like the least. It's not nearly as entertaining as Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, in my opinion. I would have watched the Sea Monster film 4 times as many times as this one in rewatches. So there you have it. There you have it. Part 1 of the Showa Era reviews is complete. So what are some of your favorites of the ones I covered tonight? You know, let me know. You know, drop a few comments in, let me know. I'm sure some people will disagree with me. I bet you Godzilla Raids Again. I like that one more than most people. The Sea Monster one I like more than most people. But that's the fun thing about the Godzilla franchise. If you look at top lists, everyone's list is going to be like different. It's pretty cool, and that gives some type of it gives you some insight as to that there is some variety to this franchise and how the movies play out, the themes, stuff like that. So, you know, it's those are my thoughts on the first half, basically, of the Showa Era. And be sure to join me for part 2, where we'll finish off the Showa Era. Then after that, we'll move to the Heisei and then the Millennium Hollywood Era after that. I'm not sure how I'm going to do presentation after I'm done with Showa Era. You know what I mean? Maybe I'll get some DVDs or Blu-rays and showcase them that way when we get to that. But it's pretty cool. Pretty cool Godzilla stuff here. And as always, I will see you next time.